All right, so Django validations, I forked it over already to my personal GitHub. I'm copying the URL. Let's clone it down. So git clone, we've done this hundreds of times probably by now. All right, so that cloned down. Let me get into that project and open a VS Code. All right, not sure what that was, but let's try that again. Okay, so I have my VS Code window up here. Is my screen bright enough? Seems kind of dim, but all right, got some messages, ignore that. All right, so again, this is a pre-built Django project. We don't need to do all of the steps that we normally do for a Django project, but we do need to do a number of them. So first, I want to get into my virtual environment. So I need to create that. So I'll do python-m .venv. All right, so step one was creating that virtual environment. Sure, I'll hit yes. Then I want to source it, which means actually get into it. So venv/bin/activate. Cool. All right, so I'm in my virtual environment, as you can see, that's prepended. All right, so again, this is a case where the project's built for you. So we have this requirements.txt, which is what's going to tell us what versions of each of these libraries we need. So again, this is going to be Django 2.1.5. That's probably not the latest Django version, but this is what this project's written on. I know in the past, I actually ignored the requirements.txt file, just install the latest Django, and that actually caused problems for me. And unfortunately, this was during a lecture, so I was running into errors I didn't anticipate. But yeah, so that's one lesson of kind of stick with the versions that they give you instead of trying to use the latest and greatest. All right, so to install from the requirements.txt, I could do pip install -r and then the requirements.txt file. And that should install all 5 of these libraries. I'm not sure what the bottom 3 are. They're probably just ancillary libraries, but Django and Cycob are what 2 that we want. Okay, so that installed, no errors. That looks good. All right, so my Django project should be ready to go in terms of running the test cases. So again, an important thing to remember for the running the test suite, Django will automatically create a database for you, like a temporary database for the test cases. And then when the test suite is aborting, it'll delete that database. So if we look at our test cases, we have 8 test cases. Make this a little smaller. So we want to pass all of these. Now, I think you guys might have realized that there are some false positives, as in, if I run this right now, I'll pass the first 4 test cases just kind of automatically. And that's not what we want. So normally we advise you're not supposed to modify the test cases, but in this case, when I was doing this, I added in just a random assert that's gonna fail. So let's do assert false, true. The purpose of me doing this is I don't ever want to get to line 15. The whole point of this test case is so when I call full clean, it should throw an exception, and that exception should be what's shown down here, right? So there's not like a multifaceted test case. It's a single test case or single responsibility of trying to figure out, do we actually get this error with this setup here? So if I run it this way, I should fail the first test case without any other changes. So if I do Python manage.py test, and then I'm going to use the fail fast, fail fast flag. So the first test case I fail, it'll stop after that. Okay, so I ran one test case, it failed. True is not false, meaning I hit this test case right here, or this assertion failed. That's what I wanted, because again, this test case is not passing right now because the goal is to hit this portion. All right, so just going over the first one, I know the question was for the last one. Let's just make sure we're doing this correctly. So if I go to my models, all right, well, my models have nothing in them, so that kind of makes sense why my test case might fail. Let's comment out the first one, delete this. All right, so the question is, if I ran it as is there some pre-built-in validation that's gonna check for this to be non-blank, or do we need to add some custom validators or validation? So it's easy enough to test. If I run fail fast, all right, I got more errors. Oh, I need a max length. I think that's what it's complaining about. Try that again. Yeah, let's delete it. Okay, so I was able to get, I think, past the first test case. Notice that green dot here, probably kind of hard to see on my screen, but I was able to get past my first test case without doing anything extra. So it seems like there's whatever the logic is for checking the field values built in the Django, it's going to check for a non-blank value. Let's actually take a detour into documentation. So let's go to Django char field and take a look at the model reference. Hopefully you guys are getting familiar with this page because I'm going to be looking up a lot of things. All right, so max length is required, DB collation. Options, that's what I want to put. All right, so what I was trying to look up, looks like there's not, I didn't find what I was looking for, but maybe let's try a little more searching. So I was looking for something called blank. There's a blank attribute. So maybe it's there, blank. Okay, this is what I was looking for. So this is applicable to all field types. So I was looking specifically for char field, but every field type that you have off the model objects, this applies to all of them. So I was interested in this item called blank, or this parameter called blank. So if true, the field is allowed to be blank, default is false. So this is the functionality that is actually working for us, as in the test case that I passed. The reason I'm passing is because the default value for blank is false, meaning the value cannot be blank. If I changed it to true, for example, like if I want to allow like a blank name here, I can set blank equal to true. And now if I ran my test case, it's going to run full clean, but the validator is going to say, all right, you have a blank value, that's okay now. So it's going to hit this assertion here. So I'm not going to pass this test case because I'm allowing blank values, and that's not what we want. So ran one test case. Notice I failed the first test case there. Any questions?
So is this is this related to like why I seem to often get some kind of an error about providing a one-off default, or like adding in a default into the models.py?
It's a great question. This is not necessarily related to it. I've seen that error many times. I assume it's because whenever you update your models, so let's say I add a new field name in, and then if I run make migrations and migrate, you're usually going to see I don't know if it's an error, but it's a warning, or I guess it's a prompt saying, hey, you added a new field. There's going to be existing records in the previous iteration of the table. So let's say my previous table only had first name. And then I later added last name and made migrations. And when you go to migrate, they'll say, hey, you need a default value. Actually, it might be during migrations. They'll say, hey, you need a default value because I'm adding a new field. So any existing records needs to know what value is going to be taken in for that field. In this case, our test database is being created for us, so it doesn't seem like we need to worry about that. But yeah, if you see that, I guess, prompt, you can have two options. One is to either provide a default value right now for every existing record, or kind of abort the operation and specify a default in here. So you can say default, let's say the default last name is going to be Smith, because that's a prevalent last name. So you can specify a default value, meaning if a value was not provided, it's going to default to whatever you specify, or you could do a one-off and just repopulate every existing record with one default, but not require every item to have a default value like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So whenever it's on the make migrations, so
yeah.
Whenever you add the default value, can you then erase that the next go around and it'll still be present, or do you have to leave? Because I've just left it in as like stroke equals models.char field, and then inside of there max length is 255, and then default and then give a string or whatever.
Gotcha.
Something like that.
Yeah, let's actually go through it. I think it's worthwhile because I've seen this many times. I'm sure you guys either ran into or will run into it. So I'm going to quickly set up my own database if you guys are up for that detour. So let's bring up the terminal, a new one going. All right, so again, I'm not going to run my test suite. I'm just going to run this on my own. So to do this, I'm going to create DB, call it swim DB. Okay, since I made that DB, I need to go into my settings file. Hopefully you guys are getting familiar with these steps. I want to go down to databases. I want to change this. So hopefully this won't screw up my test cases, but I've named mine swim DB. And run that here. Okay, so that should be good. Right, so we want to run migrations. All right, so if I try to do create or Python manage.py make migrations, I want to see what my models look like right now. All right, I have first name here, and I'm allowing it to be blank for whatever reason. That's fine. Run that, no changes detected, so let's migrate. Okay, so it did everything and the initial migration. All right, so now let's try to make a change and see if that impacts it. I'm actually unsure what's going to happen. Let's find out. So max length will be 64 again. Say we can't make it blank. Let's try running make migration again. No changes detected. Curious. Swim records is there. All right, I'm a little confused. So I added a new field, but it says no changes detected.
I think this one, I think the migrations are already set up with all of those in there already.
Okay, but I'm trying to figure out where the migrations file even is. All right, let's just try adding another field then if that's the way it's trying to behave. So let's go with middle name equals char field. I don't know if that'll trigger a change. All right, something's amiss here. Settings. So if I look at my swim DB, D, yeah, so it doesn't have any of my tables here, so it doesn't look like it's even honoring my models, and I'm a little confused as to why that would be. All right, I'm gonna mess with this for maybe 60 seconds. Can't figure it out. Might kind of had a abandoned ship here, but usually when I make changes to my models, I should be able to migrate. But notice again that in my database, there's no table for my app, right? Swim records is my app, but I'm not even seeing that in here. And not sure why. Anyone have any ideas?
No, but I noticed, so this is probably a mistake on my part, but I tried using Python manage.py make migrations swim records, the name of the app. And that's whenever I'm getting the, you're trying to add a non-nullable field to swim record without a default. Whenever I try to use the Postgres database, I get some additional warnings.
All right, there we go. So yeah, I guess I had to specify the app. Thanks for mentioning that. All right, so now that I have that, I have first name and middle name, and let's commit those changes. So we'll do Python manage.py migrate. Okay, cool. So now it created my swim records table. Let's try actually adding a new field. So let's call it last name. It's going to equal same thing. And I think this is what Morgan was probably talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if I try to run make migrations here, Yes, you'll get this prompt. I've seen it off many times. You'll probably see it if not, you haven't already. But what's going on here is we added a new field to our models. Or essentially, we're going to add a new field or column to our table in our database. So it's asking, hey, we might have some records in our table right now. What do you want me to do with those records? The first option is, hey, every existing record in a database right now, give me a value to insert into this new column. So if I'm adding a last name, I could say, okay, everyone's going to get a last name of Smith, or I could just say empty string, maybe just a space, whatever I want for current records to be adopted. And this is a one-time change. The difference between that and the second is, let me add a default in models.py is saying you have the option to add a default here and say, okay, I want the default to be empty string or blah, or whatever you think the default should be. So let's say it's going to be empty string is my default. The difference here is every future record that gets inserted, if you don't provide a last name, it's going to default to empty string. Now, if that's the behavior you want, then you want to specify a default in your models. And if that's not the behavior you want, if you only want a one-off change where you're like, all right, I'm adding a new column, let me just update my current records with some value so that there's something in there, then you want to choose option 1. So again, it just depends on what you want to do. So if you want a default that sticks for every future record, you want to specify a default up here in your models. If you only want to do it for past records, then you specify, all right, I'm going to go to 1 and say default value is going to be Smith. I don't know if I need to put that in quotes. Smith. All right, so it says, okay, cool. That's going to be a default for all existing records right now. All right, so I think, Morgan, was that what you're running into?
Yeah, that answered all my questions and then some. Thank you.
Cool, awesome. All right, so let's get to the main question at hand, which was, how do we solve the last test case here? So last test case, no break record before set record. So does not allow records to be broken before the record dates, which makes sense, right? You can't break a record if the record doesn't exist yet. So this is where it gets a little trickier than the past few test cases, because for most of the test cases, either they just work out of the box, right? Like the blank case, if I go back to my models, which I lost models, the blank case, that's handled by default, because again, the default value, if you don't specify it, is false for these fields. So Django's automatically going to check, hey, is this blank? If it's not, it's going to throw an error. So that protects us for the first few cases. I'm going to get rid of middle name, because that's something I added. Last name, short. Let's just start uncommenting these. So team name, same thing. Relay, it's Boolean field, stroke. All right, so I'm not going to go through all these because it seems like there's not questions on all of them. So let me comment out.
Real quick before you get to the last one, for the Boolean one, was I missing anything or did we not have to do anything for that one?
I think we didn't have to do anything for that.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
I need to double check, but yeah, good questions. I'm not sure why we just have a field that's not used, but okay. So I'm going to comment out some of these test cases because I just care about the last one and I don't want to worry about adding validators for all the other ones. So let's get rid of the first 7. Unless you guys have a specific question on any of these 7, but I'm going to focus on the last one now. So can't break record before record date was set. And the question is, well, Django, is there a way in Django for Django to know that we're dealing with 2 records and that you can't break a record before a record set? No, Django's not that smart, right? These are our fields. We're the one controlling how they interact. So Django has no idea how these 2 fields relate, kind of just offhand. So this is where we need to add some validations here. But this is going to be a little different because we need to compare 2 different records. And those records will be kind of saved at different points. So we can't simply add a validator. Like I can't add a validator to broken record date, right? So I can't say validators equals whatever, my validator, because this is only going to check something about record broken date. It doesn't have really access to these other fields. But in this case, we want to check that record broken date is after record date. So we're comparing 2 different fields. So we can't do this with a simple validator for one of these fields. This is where, again, documentation, which we kind of say over and over, is your key to figuring out how to do this. I'm gonna look up full clean. Let's see if I can find the correct page for it. Model instance, sure. Full clean. Okay, so this is what's going on when you're validating objects. So I don't know if you guys read this or came across this, but there are 3 things that are going to be called. There's clean fields, clean, and validate unique. So these 3 methods get called when you call full clean. Now, documentation will clue you into this. You could also dive into the code yourself. So this is something that I've done before. Again, isn't always useful, but if you're curious, you can right-click. Let's see. Right-click on this method and go to definition. All right, so I'm taking the full clean. This is not where I want to be. Let's see. Can I go to? Yeah. So this is some header file that doesn't really get me what I want. So my goal was to actually look into the full clean method and see what it's doing. Unfortunately, this is not where I want to go.
Did you hit declaration instead of definition?
No, it's buried
Oh.
somewhere. Oh, no, that didn't work. So usually you can dive into the base code. I'm sure there's some way for me to get to the file that I want to. I'm not gonna kind of dig around and try to find that. But again, full clean, reading documentation tells us these 3 methods are being called. So clean fields, let's learn about that quickly. So clean field, this method will validate all fields of on your model. The optional exclude argument lets you provide a list of fields excluded. So if you don't want to validate one particular field, you can omit them for clean fields. Then there's this clean method. This method should be used to provide custom model validation and modify attributes for your model if desired. For instance, you can use it automatically to provide a value for a field or to do a validation that requires access to more than one field. So this sounds like what we need to do, right? We're trying to validate 2 different fields in conjunction, right? We want record broken date, if it exists, to be set after record date, right? So again, models, we're trying to compare, validate using both of those fields in conjunction. So it looks like this clean method is the place to do it, right? It says validation requires access to more than one single field. So if we dig into our OOP toolset or toolbox, remember we can override methods from a base class. So models.model provides a definition for clean, but we're allowed to override it, as in kind of take over the logic and do what we want. All right, so in this case, I could add a method called def clean, and note it must be named clean because that is the method that is provided from a base class, right? I don't have the option of saying clean stuff. If I name it that, it's not going to work like I want because the base logic is calling a method called clean, and that'll bubble up to this level and look for something called clean. So in this case, we'll do self, and then let's take a look at the example here. So don't allow. All right, so we can add our logic here. Right, so let's take a look at our test case and see what it's asking for. So again, it does not allow records to be broken before the record dates. All right, so in this case, record broken date is yesterday, or yeah, it's yesterday, and then the record date is today. So in this case, the broken date will be before the record date, which is not what we want. So we go to validators. We can say if self.broken dates is less than self.date. Now, this is where I need to look up more documentation, how to compare dates. Python, can you do less than? I think that should work. Yep, looks like I could just compare with the less than, so we'll go with that. So if record broken date is less than record date, we want to throw some sort of exception, and that's going to, oh, thank you. That's going to have this particular message. So I'm just going to copy this message because that is what it's expecting. And let's take a look at that. So we want to raise a validation error. And that validation error will have, let's see, for record broken dates. So I'm creating a dictionary here. And this is, again, from reading documentation. We can pass it a dictionary and a message. The reason I'm passing this field is because that is a field that we're checking for the error message. So the error will be on the record broken date. They'll tell you need to modify that. And the error message will be can't break record before it's set. One thing I want to point out here, I'm actually surprised that the example that we looked at is not doing this. I might want to read this more in detail. Usually speaking, you want to call the base class even though you're overriding the base class. What I mean by that is I want to call super and clean here. Now, why do I want to do this? Well, the base functionality might be doing some extra stuff, and I still want that to be done, right? If I don't call the base class, whenever the base logic calls the clean method, we're going to do what we want, but we're going to kind of omit what the base class wanted to do. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you fully want to override it and not do any of the base logic. In this case, I don't know what the base class is doing, so I'm going to default to calling the base class and say, hey, your clean method, do whatever you need to do. I'm going to do something on top of that. So first, I'm going to say, do whatever was supposed to be done by the original clean method, and I'm going to do my custom logic after that. I'm going to pause there. Does that concept make sense? This is an OOP concept of calling the base class, letting it do its thing, and then overriding it with your functionality. Again, this is a case-by-case basis, but usually speaking, or generally speaking, always call the base class, or sorry, the base function. So in this case, this is the derived function. This is the base function. Always call the base function unless you have a reason not to. I'll pause for questions there.
I'm not sure if I missed this or not. Do we use value error or validation error?
Oh, you are right. I said validation error, but I mistyped. I think I was relying on VS Code autofill. Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Yes, we want to raise a validation error because that is what we're capturing here. Thank you. That would have led me astray. All right. So again, that's how I should be checking. Again, obviously, we should see if our test case passes. So first off, let me just run this without my logic. And let's see if our test case fails, which we would expect it to. So let me bring up my terminal here. I'm going to do Python. Let's go up somewhere here. Somewhere. All right, there we go. So on Python manage py test got passed. Okay, looks like I got some more errors. Column swim records team name does not exist. Is it because I commented out all these? All right. I'm not sure if it's because I commented out these test cases. Let me just cheat quickly. So comment these back in. True. Sorry, I'm not sure where this error is coming from. I'm not sure if these test cases are a problem. I'm gonna fake passing all these test cases. Let's see if that changes my error here. Yes. All right, same error. Oh, I bet it's because I renamed my database. Would that be it? All right, sorry for technical difficulties here. So for some reason, team name does not exist. Is it because my migration's here? Let's get rid of these migrations. here. Yes. All right, I think I got a different error this time, so that's my bad. All right, stroke needs to have a max length. Integer is fine, date time is fine. Okay, I think I should be good now. Pass, yes. Okay, we ran 8 test cases and we passed them all. How did that happen? Yes. How did we pass that test case?
It's just running full clean and that passes.
What was that?
It's that test case is just running full clean and it passes.
Oh, okay, I see. Thank you.
Oh,
So if
that's
I do a self assert false, I want the validation error to be raised. So again, the goal of the test case is to hit this part of my code. I do not want to hit line 79. So if I run this, I think that's what should clear it up. Yep, thank you. Yeah, so again, we call full clean with the base functionality. Full clean is going like, all right, cool. Your record date, your broken date look fine to me because we didn't tell it how they actually interact. So now, given this, if I add back our logic here, so we're checking if record broken date is less than the record date, we want to raise this error. So hopefully now, if I run this, I should hopefully pass my test case. All right, there we go. So we pass that test case because now when the clean method is called by the base logic, again, the base logic is from models.model, it's going to call, when we call full clean, as we'll saw in our documentation, where did it go? Our documentation tells us when full clean is called, these 3 methods are called in the base class, right? Clean fields, clean, and validate unique. We chose to override clean because looking at the documentation, it tells us, all right, if you need to do validation that requires more than a single field, clean is a method where you can get it done. Okay, so that was our last test case. I forget who asked the question about it, but did that kind of clear things up? Any remaining questions or additional questions that came from what we just did here?
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. Last call for any other questions on Django validation challenge. If not, we can move on from this. All right, sounds like we're good here. So I'm going to stop recording.